Let me get started, and thanks very much for coming along today. What I wanted to just generally talk about is landscape and tourism in Scotland and in relation to Scotland's geology. Well, I said the seminar series would involve presentations by experts, and of course that means I'm calling myself an expert, and I'm not sure if I am. But I've been leading geological tours in Scotland for 20 years now with various groups. A lot of day trips and holidays for people from Britain who are interested in geology, but also, as I'll explain, a bit more kind of wide-ranging and dealing with overseas visitors as well. What I'd like to just sort of explore today is what the issues are with getting across to visitors, whether they're visitors from the UK or from overseas, kind of getting a handle on Scotland's geological story, what's happening at the moment, and what the potential is to do more. And really, well, what's the problems? Is everything rosy? And well, a kind of starting point, I suppose, is why do people come to Scotland? What are visitors coming for? If you do a quick Google search for, well, what is Scotland, you get lots of beautiful pictures of scenery. And we know from visitor surveys going back decades that scenery is the draw for Scottish tourism. It's the number one. Highland cows have quite a starring role as well, but it's mainly scenery. But of course, it's not just the look of the land. What really appeals to people is the castles and the human connection with the landscape, and a realization that this is a landscape which has evolved through geological processes, but also had a profound influence and input from the people that have lived in it historically and the people that live there today. So Scotland has a great package, which until this year was doing fantastically well in growing tourism, and the tourism figures have been going up recently, and associated with that, starting to get issues in places like Edinburgh and Skye with too many visitors at peak times, and issues around that. Well, we've got a great product there, and it's based on our scenery. But it's much more multi-dimensional than just being about scenery. But I don't think it's really particularly about geology. So if you go to a place like Dumbarton Rock, the castle sitting on top of the rock there, really popular visitor attraction, and there's many like this around the country. And of course, a geologist looks at this and sees the volcanic plug and connects it with volcanic activity in the past, and the story not just of the volcanic activity but also of erosion of this landscape, so that the contrast between the harder volcanic rock has come out from the surrounding softer rock, and you've got a chunk of rock which is shaped in a particular way by these geological processes and then has been useful to people. So it's a rich story, and if you go there you will find information. It's very superficial level about the volcano. It does mention that it was a volcano and when it erupted, but what sort of used me about Dumbarton Rock is this notice last winter blaming the geological nature of the rock for the reason for closing early to allow people to clamber back down the horrible steps that they had to go up. And I'd like to sort of present today a vision where the geology is maybe not seen as so much of a problem, but is actually part of a solution, and so it's seen as a very positive thing, that actually we should be paying more attention to this geology and giving people information about it for everyone's benefit, not just for the tourists' benefit, but actually for the local communities that are relying on that tourist income and looking into coming decades. Scotland's doing great at the moment, but where's tourism going? What's it going to be like in 10 years and 20 years? And I think there's a big case to be made for doing better at talking about our geological heritage as part of what we talk about. And another really good example is one of the big tourist attractions in the Highlands, Glencoe. Did I see? We've got experts about Glencoe's geology here, which is really nice. And of course, visitors in Glencoe are overawed by the scenery and the human story of the massacre. But I think there's a missed opportunity because geologically it's a fascinating story as well. And if you stop by one of the big car parks in Glencoe, you'll see information boards that tell you about the scenery and tell you about the volcanic activity. But they really kind of miss the mark in terms of actually getting the wow of that story across. In the scale of the volcanic activity that's there. And they also miss the chance to kind of say, but this is different, that actually Glencoe as a glen looks the way it is because the volcanic activity that's been preserved there is different from a lot of the rest of the Highlands. And so when we talk about geological information, I think geologists, of course, are really keen to kind of get the detail in there, but I don't think we should lose sight of the big picture connections with what visitors will actually connect with and be able to understand in what they see and what they experience. So the term is geotourism, and unfortunately, as with a lot of these things, you get different kind of interpretations of this. And I'm certainly not going to want to get dragged into a conversation about what geotourism actually is. Frustratingly, the National Geographic took an existing term that was being used in a very particular geological context and applied it to a much more ecotourism, local community connection type of theme that they wanted to develop. So that's one part of it. But the other part of it is what geotourism actually is, who it's for. And so I think maybe in Scotland, the best thing for us to do is take a lead from the geoparks. And there's another can of worms, if you like, in terms of definitions. But geoparks are about local communities recognizing and using and conserving their local geological heritage. So bringing in visitors, explaining about it, the landscape and the geology, and making economic activity from it. And geoparks also have that very strong sort of sustainability message about understanding how the earth works. So I think in its broadest terms, we can look to a future of Scotland where people have got a better awareness of the geology of Scotland, but it's not just necessarily for its own sake. Just about understanding rocks, but it's about that kind of wider appreciation of how that geology fits into Scotland and how the sustainability issues and climate change can be learned about and understood through our appreciation of the geology as well. So in terms of the work I do, and I think that kind of broader sector, I think there's two different strands really to geotourism, and I think that both of them have got really interesting potential. Firstly, the geologically aware, the people that already coming to Scotland know a bit about geology. And I'm not just talking about geologists. There are hundreds of thousands of people around the world who don't have a geology degree, but are really interested in the subject. And they often know about Scotland already. They recognise Scotland as being a place which has got really special geology. And they already are coming in, well, who knows? Who knows what sort of numbers? And that's one of our issues, perhaps. Golf tourism, for example, is really recognised in Scotland, and there's statistics about how many people come from overseas with their golf clubs to play a round of golf. We don't have that for geology, and it'd be really nice to have that, because I think it's probably quite a surprising number. So that's one part of it. But the other part of it is about that more general visitor. And I've got great personal experience of this with my family, who claim not to be at all interested in rocks and roll their eyes whenever I mention anything about geology. But I think for that kind of less interested visitor, there's the opportunities to make the connections with the big stories, as I was talking about earlier in Glencoe, and kind of make the connection between the bedrock and the processes of the past with how the landscape looks today, the human story of that landscape, and looking forward into the future. So first of all, Scotland for the geologists, and I think there's huge potential here. I've done a little bit of engaging with international visitors in this case, and one very successful enterprise that I've been running for about almost 10 years now is with a Californian organization, actually a Californian geologist, who comes now every year to do a 12-day or a 14-day tour of Scotland. And we've now developed 3 different sort of 2-week itineraries. This is the map shows the first one, which is the kind of geological highlights, and we go to Siccar Point and Edinburgh and St Andrews and up to Inverness and the Black Isle, over to Ullapool and Assynt, and then down through Skye and Lochaber and back. Back to Edinburgh, and it's a fantastic kind of 12-day tour, and we get geologists mostly from North America coming on that and really soaking up this amazing geological story. And what I've got from these sort of tours is that Scotland's geology is great. There's the landscape and the rocks have got an interesting story to tell, and you don't get this sort of scale of geology very commonly elsewhere in the world, where there's so much variety in terms of different rock types and the age ranges, and it's very easy to travel around. So in that sort of trip, we try and minimize the amount of time we're spending in the coach and getting out every day and walking for a couple of hours. And so over that 10, 12, 14 days, you get a really nice range of scenery, rock types, and different geological stories, plus seeing the very strong connections into everything else. So we've got something to sell. We've started using this slogan, the home of geology, and I invented it and discovered that nobody else was using it. So we started using it on the ScottishGeology.com website, and it's now there. We've now got it. So officially, Scotland is the home of geology, and I think that's something we can market around the world. We should be making more of it and bringing people from abroad specifically to say, yes, this is it. And of course, I haven't mentioned yet about the birthplace of geology and James Hutton and so many other lines of geology which have developed from places like Glencoe is another great example. So there's lots there which we can make use of. So what do these people need? Well, if they're a professional geological party doing a field trip, there's a huge amount of information available. A lot of really good information, very wide-ranging, and this is just quick selection from my bookcase, and there's a range there. There's some stuff that's 20, 30 years old. There's some stuff that's just been published in the last year, but this stuff's really accessible. And of course, as well as the physical printed books and excursion guides, there's a lot of academic papers, and certainly recently a lot of stuff that's been published with very clear images and photographs and grid references. So it's really easy to take a paper if you know geology and to go and see some really good stuff. So in some ways, to sort of support this industry, if you like, there's a lot of information there, but how do you find it? How to make it easy for overseas geologists to say, oh, look, this is where I can put together a really nice field excursion and go and visit. Or I'm a tourist, a geological tourist from another country. I've studied the geology in my country. I wonder, can I go to Scotland and easily find my way around and see some great geology? I think the answer is yes, but it probably needs, there's always work to be done in making that more easy for people to do. There's also the university sector, and I'm not going to say too much about this today because I'm trying to line up a session for maybe 2 or 3 weeks' time, where it'd be great to get some university researchers, particularly people that are organising field trips, and to talk more about this issue and the connection of the kind of university sector with Scotland's geology. But a little bit of experience with that, and this is a group from Tokyo City University in Japan, and they come to Scotland every year, and of course they're coming for that range of rock types and ages and processes that you don't get in Japan, and they are self-led, and they get around by public transport, and they really show what can be done to get to some really wide-ranging places, and they are always so enthusiastic about this, and they've got good connections with people like John Faithful in Glasgow University in terms of ongoing research as well. So it's a really nice connection, but it's fundamentally about bringing students and showing them a range of good geology, and they see Scotland as being absolutely ideal for that circumstance. And of course that picture, I'm sure some of you will recognise as Siccar Point, because I think for geologists, of course, Siccar Point is really well known. It's probably the most important geological site in the world. You can argue about that, but there's no doubt that it's very often included in university curricula. It's often talked about in high schools, I've discovered, not in Scotland, of course. That would be too obvious, but elsewhere in the world, people learn about James Hutton and they learn about Siccar Point. So it's this very interesting and beautiful site, and there are issues because it's at the bottom of a steep grassy slope, and there's a lot of universities aren't too keen about taking students there because of that, so there's definitely issues there. But for anyone who's interested in geology, we've got this beautiful site with a clear unconformity, a very clear connection with the development of geology as a science. And the nice thing is that you can go there and you can see today really as it was when James Hutton discovered it in 1788. So it's a very kind of evocative place to imagine the development of ideas. But it's also more than that, because it's that connection between the southern uplands and the central lowlands of Scotland, and you can see the geology played out in the landscape roundabout. So it's got a great deal to offer. And I've shown you two pictures of it. One of it being busy with a university group there, but it's much more common to go there and to see nobody, or maybe just a couple of people there. Isn't that amazing? About one of the most important, if not the most important, geological site in the world, and you often have it to yourself. It's changing. It's certainly getting better known, and it's nice to see that in the local communities there's quite a lot of awareness of that, and there's been various projects over the last 10 years or so which have improved the information. So there's now a couple of information boards there. They've just been replaced in the last year or so, and there's a leaflet that's available online and some good information online. So we're doing a bit better about shouting about Siccar Point, but there's still an awful lot of people in Scotland don't know that it's here and don't know about James Hutton. And I think there's a really interesting contrast between Siccar Point and places like the island of Staffa, which is geologically stunning, of course, and has got an interesting history because it's been on the tourist trail for a long time, and it's got this connection with art and music. And if you go to Staffa today, well, it's usually got a couple of hundred people scrambling around on it, and the boats are zipping backwards and forwards. And it's really interesting. Why has Staffa got boat trips and a huge draw, whereas places like Siccar Point haven't? I don't know why, but I think there's certainly an issue there that we could help address. Because both in terms of bringing people to other places and other parts of Scotland where there's interesting geology to be discovered and interesting connections with people, but also in places like Staffa, so that the visitors that go there do get some sense of geology. And it is there. There's lots of information if you search for Staffa geology, but it's often quite technical, and it misses the kind of wow of that big story of the development of the North Atlantic and volcanic activity on a huge scale on the west coast. Sometimes it's too much focusing in on the detail and missing the big picture. So I'm going to stop, but just a couple of last slides. I think my kind of personal manifesto here is to kind of say that I think that Scottish geology should be seen as an asset. I was joking about Dumbarton Castle and it being seen as a hindrance or a liability, but why aren't we making much more of that, so that Scotland as a nation recognises that our geology is important and special, that the tourist industry makes use of this, and we bring people, a range of people coming for the geology specifically, but also people that are coming for the landscape, get a richer experience because they get to see a little bit about, learn a little bit about why it looks the way it does, and for communities across Scotland to spread the tourism industry out a bit and to actually get people going to other places. And so what I'd like to see is that whenever you stop at a little visitor centre or an interpretation beside the board beside the road, or you're in a coach and you've got a excellent blue badge guide at the front with the microphone, that in all of these places people are learning a little bit about the geology. So geology is being talked about and told, but it doesn't have to be the detail for everyone, but actually focusing on these bigger stories that attractive people. So people that go to Skye, you know, there's some good, really great stuff going on about the dinosaurs, for example. People love dinosaurs, and that's a great way of kind of getting people interested. And so we tell people that some of the story. We excite them, we get them more interested, and then when they are more interested, it's really easy to find that deeper level of information, that it's easily available, that it's up to date, and that people can go as deep as they want into the subject. So the Scottish Geology Trust is, we've got a draft document, aims and activities. It's been circulated to people that have been involved in the trust activities so far. If you'd like a copy, I can send you it. But just in terms of the tourism aspects of things, this is kind of some of the things that we would like to do, is encouraging local communities to maximise the value of that local geology, to use it to bring visitors and to benefit from that. And that there's lots of different ways that can be done, whether it's physical things on the ground, which are telling people about it, but also that kind of wider way of which actually the geology is intrinsic into the landscape and culture of Scotland. And so what we'd like to do is to facilitate that, and to share good examples and to encourage more. We are going to run an annual Scottish Geology Festival, which will showcase these examples, and encourage organisations and individuals to get involved in doing more of that, and to kind of create that information hub so that it is easy to get excited about Scottish geology if you don't know about it, and you're thinking about planning a trip, but also if you're here and you're wanting to get a bit more detail, you can drill down into that. And in the longer term, really, our aspirations is to sort of balance things out a bit, to say what is the most important assets of Scottish geology, and what can be done to improve access and interpretation at the sites that don't have that. And Siccar Point is very much on the target list for that. And the people side of this, personally, I think there's a huge potential for more employment, actually, for geologists, and existing guides to do more with geology, and it'd be nice to sort of develop that network of support and promotion, so that actually, as part of what Visit Scotland is doing to promote Scotland, this is one of the strands that we are promoting. The fact, not just the fact that it's a good place to come, but when you come, the resources and the people are there to support that. And finally, the sort of head, heart, hand thing that really overall, this is what we're focusing on, is that people need to learn a bit more about geology in Scotland, and to actually develop a kind of national pride in how special it is, and to identify the value of it in all sorts of different ways, but also, very importantly, to make sure that these assets are conserved, and are valued by society. So I'm going to